Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Week 14 preview. So, Week 14 is going to be a hell of a spicy one. If you didn't see the meta preview, the heroes being banned for this week will be Brigitte, Reinhardt, Reaper and Ashe, which is going to provide some very interesting stuff because that rushy sort of CCE sort of pseudo-goats comp that features Reaper and Mei and Reinhardt and D.Va is not going to be possible, because you're not going to have the Reinhardt or the Reaper or even the Brigitte that you might put into that comp. So it's going to be very interesting to see what teams do. But we're also going to see some very new stuff this week. I'm sure you all heard the news about the Titans. I'm going to make it aware to you now that I don't know what the new lineup for the Titans is as a time of recording. I know the Titans have released their entire roster, so as of recording they have no roster. So as far as I'm concerned, the Washington Justice and Florida Mayhem could be playing Ghosts this week. But the general consensus is they're going to pick up a North American contenders team. So I will go with that based on my predictions. But the other thing, obviously, is that we will see London Spitfire for the first time since, week 4, week 5, something like that, which is very, very interesting. And London Spitfire have had a few changes during that time because some of the players that they didn't have initially during the start of the league are now available because they are of age to play in the league. This is their second main tank, Jihoon, who I believe specialises in Wrecking Ball and Orisa, which would be very interesting. And also the DPS player, Although, which I don't know much about. But again, some interesting looks possibly going to come up for London Spitfire this week. But we are going to see 11 fixtures, so we're not going to hang about. We're going to get into this, and right away we will start off with a great game. This is at 9 AM on May the 9th. This is with the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Seoul Dynasty. So this is a matchup that we saw not last week but the week before, and the Seoul Dynasty got absolutely crushed. The Seoul Dynasty have not won a single map in 3 matches. They are currently 0-9. Last week against the Guangzhou Charge and Hangzhou Spark, I believe, they looked absolutely terrible. They were absolutely awful. I mean, we could excuse a 3-0 loss to the Shanghai Dragons, but the way they lost to those two teams was awful. And it was mainly down to they just didn't know what to do with Echo. They kind of like forced the Echo play, but it didn't work. And they kept forcing it. So maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel this week with a different hero pool. Seoul could go back to playing McCree, Mei, but the problem is there won't be a Reinhardt, but Gesture and Marvel could play Sigma Orisa. So we could go back to that comp, but it'll be heavily dependent, I think, on what the Shanghai Dragons play and what the meta is. If teams are going to force the Echo into Widow and McCree, which they could do because she's very oppressive on the dive, then that could really hurt Seoul. It could really, really hurt Seoul. I think Shanghai Dragons should come out with a win nonetheless, though. Even if it's close because the meta means that Seoul are going to play better, I think it will still be Shanghai Dragons' match. So I think it's either going to be a close 3-1, 3-2, or a dominant 3-0 for Shanghai. I don't see Seoul winning. Moving on then, and at 11 AM, this is the match that a lot of people have been waiting for. Chengdu Hunters taking on the London Spitfire. So, Chengdu Hunters, up until now, have been regarded as probably the worst team in the Asian region. London Spitfire, we really don't know. We really, really, really don't know. But if I was a betting man, I would say London should get a win over the Chengdu Hunters. Again, it depends how London come out. We could see 2 different Londons. We could see either the London that has hard grinded in this period that they've had off, and it's really triggered some team synergy that they didn't have before, because remember, they're coming in with an entirely new roster, so it's going to take a while to get this team to work together well, and that might have happened during this break, and then they can come in and start really, really hitting the ground running. Or we get the long-term break syndrome, which means London get absolutely pummeled this week. And we did see them get pummeled in the first week of play this season, but again, they were against Paris, and I can't remember what the other team was, but it was definitely Paris. And so this week, it could go either way for the Spitfire, but a narrow victory for the Spitfire over Chengdu Hunters is what I would go for. Remember, the London Spitfire have not got a dominant victory this year yet, because the games they've won, they're 3-2 record right now, and they've literally all 3 of those wins have been 3-2s. So there's a difficult thing to call with London Spitfire here. One of those wins was over the Florida Mayhem though, but that was a Florida Mayhem that perhaps isn't as good as the Florida Mayhem we see now. So it's very difficult to call with London Spitfire, but I would go for a win over the Chengdu Hunters for the Spitfire though. At 1 PM we will see the Guangzhou Charge taking on the New York Excelsior. I would expect the New York Excelsior to get a win over the Guangzhou Charge. They are a better team, I would say, than the Guangzhou Charge. They may have lost narrowly to the Shanghai Dragons last week after a poor second half display, but I think they've got just better quality than the Guangzhou Charge, unless the Guangzhou Charge pick up any of the ex-Vancouver Titans roster in the meantime, but I don't expect them to be doing that quick. Moving on, and a little bit later on in the day, at 8 PM BST, we will see the Paris Eternal taking on the Los Angeles Gladiators, a matchup I don't believe we have seen this season. So, this is going to be really, really interesting. Because this could be either a mid-table clash, or it could be Paris Eternal getting the win they should get, and then we say that Gladiators, they're a mid-table team, and Paris are more of a team that's pushing for the top 6. So this is a big indicator match, and it's one of these cross-NA matches that are going to be very, very interesting, and we're going to find out a lot from. So I would go for a Paris win. I think they're a better team than the Gladiators, even though the Gladiators have got some really good parts. I don't think the team's quite there, and if Fielder was anything to go by for the Paris Eternal last week, even on 200 ping, I think he could get the Paris Eternal the win over the Gladiators. So I would go for a Paris Eternal win, but it could be close. At 10 PM, we will see the Washington Justice taking on the Vancouver Titans. So, yes, interesting. Vancouver Titans, if it's a tier 2 team from Contenders NA, and if it's one of the two candidates I'm thinking of, and I'm not going to mention them right now, I think they will beat the Washington Justice. I'm not going to lie, I think they're going to beat the Washington Justice if it's one of those two teams. However, it might not be. So, it's a very difficult one to call. But in any case, they are not going to be settled. So, I would expect this one to be close. Even despite Washington Justice's, not brilliant play right now. Let's be honest, they're not particularly great with their ult usage. Their team synergy is not really there. But the Washington Justice should be able to make this a close game, if not get a sneaky victory over the Vancouver Titans, because the Vancouver Titans is just a mess. Even if they get that roster in, and, they've literally just sat at their chairs. So, it's going to be very interesting. But Washington Justice should be able to make this close, but I just can't call who's going to win that match. I cannot call it. At midnight, so we're heading into May the 10th here, Houston Outlaws taking on the Atlanta Reign. It was a difficult week for Atlanta Reign last week because they got reverse swept by the Los Angeles Valiant, which is not the best of looks. But I would expect Atlanta Reign to be able to get a win over the Houston Outlaws. The question is, if we do see Echo forced as an Echo dive, then it'll be interesting to see what the Houston Outlaws come out with. Because Houston Outlaws have been historically, this season, much better on the dive than anything else. But they really couldn't compete last week with the San Francisco Shock, but that's no surprise because the San Francisco Shock are really good. The Atlanta Reign aren't on the San Francisco Shock's level though. So, Outlaws could make a game of this, but I still think Atlanta Reign will get a 3-1, 3-2 victory. Anyway, moving on, 2 AM, we will see the Los Angeles Valiant take it on the Boston Uprising. So, oh boy. The Ash is out of the pool, which is not brilliant for Valiant, but I said this in the meta preview. Valiant could run 6 supports and still get a win over Boston Uprising. I think there's only one team in the league that perhaps 2 now, that I would have said that, you're actually going to have to go out and play against the Boston Uprising to get a victory. Although, I am harsh on the Boston Uprising here because they did have a better display last week against the Florida Mayhem than they had previously. So, I think there are slight improvements for the Boston Uprising, but I think the Valiant are just going to be too strong for this Uprising roster right now. So, a 3-0 for the Valiant I think is realistic. But if Boston can make this close again, then maybe we can start saying that this Boston team is getting on the board finally. But it's very early days. At 9 AM on the Sunday then, we will see Hangzhou Spark taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Again, I don't expect this to be especially close. Hangzhou Spark looked better on the Echo comp from last week, but we don't know whether that's going to be played all that much. So Shanghai Dragons are strong on every comp though. So I'd expect Shanghai Dragons to get a good victory here, but I want to see improvement for the Hangzhou Spark, take a map off the Dragons, and finally we're seeing a Spark that perhaps is improving. Then at 11 AM, we see the London Spitfire taking on the Guangzhou Charge. So this is definitely the bigger test of the weekend for the Spitfire. This is very close, I think. I think just because it's such early days in terms of coming back for the Spitfire, I think the Guangzhou Charge get the victory here. especially with the incredible flex DPS in terms of Nero that they've got. Again, it could be heavily meta dependent on what happens here, but I think Guangzhou Charge will get a victory over London Spitfire. 3-2, 3-1 maybe, something like that. A little bit later in the day at 8 PM, we will see the Dallas Fuel taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. So it was a good week for the Fuel last week, but now they've kind of just been dumped into the fire pit in some respects. Philadelphia Fusion are an incredibly versatile team, and Dallas Fuel, I mean, they could make a game of this. And if Dallas Fuel make a game of this, then I'll be very impressed, because I really think the Dallas Fuel have been improving. I really, really do think that. And I think we're past the point of let's not hype up the Fuel because they'll break the promise. I really think there is quality in this Fuel lineup now. And I think the DPS may be able to go toe-to-toe with the Philadelphia Fusion, but the problem is, remember, Carpe will be back on the Widowmaker and McCree this week, most likely. We didn't see him last week. We saw Hisu, Ivy, and EQO, but I think he'll be back this week considering the hero pool. So it's going to be a rough one for Dallas, but I think they'll take at least a map. So 3-1 for the Fusion, I reckon. But at 10 PM, the Toronto Defiant will take on the San Francisco Shock. Oh, that's brutal. Toronto Defiant, I really don't see... I don't see a win here at all. And I don't see a map either. I think the San Francisco Shock have really hit the ground running now. I think they've really, really found momentum. They slipped up in a couple of weeks ago. Well, not a couple of weeks ago now, but a month ago now. But they really, really started to put some wins on the board now. Last week was a demonstration of that. They really did sweep aside the Houston Outlaws. And again, they're a team that can adapt to anything. So I would expect the San Francisco Shock to get a 3-0 here. I really don't think there's any other... I don't think there's beating around the bush here for the Toronto Defiant. This is a... Well, let's hope we get something out of it. But if we don't, let's not get too upset over it. They are a very good team. But moving on, last match of the weekend will be at midnight on that Monday, and it'll be the Florida Mayhem taking on the Vancouver Titans. So this will be the harder match for the new Titans lineup, whatever it may be. And this I find a little bit easier to call than the Washington match, maybe, because I think whatever tier 2 team the Titans pick up from NA, I think the Florida Mayhem have the ability to beat them. And I think the Florida Mayhem really are... It's going to be an interesting month of May for the Florida Mayhem, because they've actually got a fairly nice schedule. This is possibly the toughest fixture they will face, because they faced Boston, and next week they'll face Washington. So this is going to be the toughest fixture for Florida, and Vancouver have to prepare for Washington as well. So Florida, I would expect to get a victory here. And if they get a victory here, I really think Florida could go unbeaten in May, which could be the best month that Florida Mayhem have ever had in Overwatch League history. So it's looking up for the Mayhem. I think they should be able to get a win over the Vancouver Titans. 3-2, 3-1 maybe. I think the new Titans roster will be raring to go, and they will want to make it close. But I think the Mayhem should have a little bit too much quality and a little bit too much Overwatch League experience for the Vancouver Titans right now. So yeah, that's what I go for. But it's going to be an interesting week. I mean, last week was crazy with Echo. No matter what the meta is this week, we are going to see some really interesting stuff, because Paris versus Los Angeles Gladiators is going to be interesting. We're going to see the return of London, which will give us a first indication of where exactly London is, because Seoul doing so badly in the past 3 matches, could London be the 3rd best team in Asia? It's possible. But it's also possible that London could be the worst team in Asia. So it's weird. It's really weird. It's going to be an incredibly interesting week. And will Seoul be able to bounce back against Shanghai? That's another thing as well. Even if Seoul don't win, if they make it a close match, it would be very, very interesting. And then obviously, the big elephant in the room is this new Vancouver Titans roster, whatever it may be. At time of release of this video, you probably know what it is. I would hope so. It's Friday. At least, you know. Titans, don't leave it too late, you know. Do announce it. People want to get to know their players before they play. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this new Titans roster is and how it performs, being, you know, kind of dropped in at the deep end without too much time to prepare. Although, one caveat to that statement that Vancouver Titans released is that you don't always believe the PR. This has been going on for a couple of weeks with the Vancouver Titans, and you don't know how long they've had this roster signed. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.